Hello, welcome to this video on siding. So this video is in relation to the small object still life. Set up your still life on a flat surface with objects that are relatively the same size. I just went ahead and chose spools of thread because I had a bunch of them and they were all the same size. And then I lay them out without too much overthinking, just kind of put them in a fairly random pattern. And then I sat down, grabbed a sheet of newsprint and some bind charcoal, and just quickly laid out a mass gesture drawing with a guess of where these spools lay on the page on my picture plane. My first step was to establish the horizon line, which is the back edge of the table, right? So I was kind of saying, all right, this is going to be about here. So I have the majority of the space of my page to decide where my thread goes. The next thought is to start to do a little bit of measuring and sighting. And one of the key concepts for this project is the idea of how these objects relate to the overall space that they're in versus getting super caught up in drawing all the details of the objects themselves. You can render specific objects, but if they're not in context with one another, you're going to end up with a non-naturalistic feeling drawing, right? You've probably encountered that if you've ever done portraits. You've drawn one eye really well, and you realize, oh, I have to put another eye in, and it has to relate and be proportional to where I started. So this is kind of like practice in allowing yourself to figure out that placement and those relationships versus getting caught up in details of just the objects themselves. So the first thing we're going to do is pick a unit of measure, and my unit of measure is the red thread, which is this guy. Boom! You can see it right there. It's easy to see, it's easy to pick out, it's distinctive, it has a distinctive color, it's red. So that was an easy one for me to use as my unit of measure. Next thing I'm going to do is hold my siding stick up, close one eye, hold my arm out straight so I have some consistency there, and align the top edge of my charcoal pencil with the top of the spool of thread from my point of view, and the bottom edge of the spool of thread I'm going to mark on my pencil with my thumb. So you guys can see that, right? And this is kind of lucky from where I'm sitting and my perspective. It lines up with the place where the charcoal pencil goes orange from like the wood part of the pencil. So that will be easy to remember, which is handy. And then since I've already like established this on my drawing, this is going to be the scale in my drawing of that scale of the pencil in my sighting. Does that make sense? So if I sight it this size in the actual still life, it will end up being this size on my piece of paper. So it's really just keeping the ratios the same. I'm not making everything on my page this tiny, right? Which is good because that would be a really small drawing and it wouldn't fill the 18 by 24 space we've got. So it's really just figuring that out more as a ratio and a relationship versus being like completely exactly the same from one to the next. So now that I've got my unit of measure established, I want to figure out my first 3 spools of thread on this video just to show you guys. And then I'll just take some pics of my progress with this drawing after that so you get a sense of what to do. So the first thing I think I want to find is the space between like the top of this spool of thread and the bottom of this silver spool of thread, right? So I think I'm going to sight and measure that. And then I also want to look at what's like the angle between them. So to do that, I'm just going to take my sighting stick, hold it parallel to me, line it up visually between those 2 spools of thread. I'm going to hold it nice and steady and then say, oh, okay, there's like this slight angle. So that mass gesture was inaccurate. That's nice to know. And I'm assuming this other spool of thread is going to be inaccurate as well. And then I'm going to sight from like the top of the red spool of thread to the bottom of the silver spool of thread as far as measurement goes. And it looks like it's about half of my unit of measure. So it's from here to here. So if I'm following that angle that I established from sighting the axis line between thread and thread, and I've got my unit of measure working to help tell me like where this guy needs to be, then that means the silver thread is placed more here. So originally it was here, just for my like kind of overall quick gesture visualization, but more accurately, it's actually here. And the silver thread itself, in terms of scale, is just slightly smaller than my red thread because it's a little bit further away. So we'll block that guy in. Hello, thread number 2. And then we're going to do the same thing with the yellow thread. So I'm going to hold this out to find the axis line, keep that sighting stick parallel to me, don't tilt it forward or back. Just use it almost like the hand of a clock to find the angle between the tops of the two silver thread and yellow thread. Pull that straight over. And if you ever have trouble doing this where you like sight that line and it's perfect and you love it and then you bring it over, you can always just use another charcoal to draw that, right? Although you have to draw it with your non-dominant hand, which is hard. All right, so I kind of know my axis line angle there. Now I want to sight the difference between the bottom base of silver thread and the bottom base of yellow thread. So get my unit of measure going. All right, 1, 2, and then like just a teeny tiny bit over. So this is obviously not like measuring to the point of engineering or design drawing. It's still like just a visual reference. So whenever I say, oh, it's about 2 over plus a little bit, it's just giving me a sense. So it's not as accurate as some of you guys would probably like. 1, 2, and a tiny bit. But it at least gives you a little bit of better placement, a little bit of a double check on what you're just seeing with your overall vision as you look at your subject matter. All right, so then I can also see, like if I line this up, the top of this guy is a little bit lower than the top of that guy. So boom, I've got red, silver, yellow. And this was my original mass gesture. Pretty inaccurate, so it's always good to double check yourself. And I realize some of you guys are gonna hate like all the ghosts and like extra lines that are in your drawing. I would encourage you to leave your diagrammatic lines in this. Those are these lines that show us how things are measured and where things are placed. But if you feel like you want to erase your ghosty mass gesture that you're not crazy about, you can definitely do that. It feels very natural for me to do this drawing with my charcoal pencil, but you can definitely use your Vine charcoal. And one of the pluses of that is that you will then be able to take it out, move things around, erase things super easily. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this drawing on my own, figure out where all my other spools of thread are, and I'll put some pics up on eLearn for that. All right, good luck and happy drawing.